Let's crack open a beer and share some thoughts.
Welcome to Hopinions, and we're back once again, and we are diving straight in to the first of this week's beers, aren't we, mate?
We are. It's open, it's ready, it's looking at me, it's screaming, drink me.
Now, we are featuring 4 beers from a single brewery tonight, aren't we? You're doing 2, I'm doing 2, and we are featuring beers from, he's got so many different names. The one that's used the most is the nicest man on Twitter. So these are from Andy Parker's Elusive Brewing brewery.
Yeah, so we just so happened to put an order in at the same time, and I am going to do the American Pale Ale Overdrive Lap 18.
Okay, my first beer probably will come as no surprise to anyone, is the Shadow of the Beast. Let's talk about it no more. Let's get into these beers tonight. Cheers. Okay.
Cheers, mate. Right, well, the first thing for me is visually this beer looks spot on as an American Pale Ale. It's actually got probably a slight haze on it. It's very earthy. It's got a lovely head on it from the pouring in the bottle. A bit like we said on about Shane's beers from Cheshire Brewhouse recently. This is a bit of a cask beer.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The quality, the earthiness, the mouthfeel, all makes me think it's the closest I'm going to get to a cask beer for a while. And before we get into what you think about your beer, I have to admit I think some of the small pack I've been tasting recently, some of the conditioning has been brilliant, whether that be the secondary fermentation. But I think small pack has really been nailed by a lot of breweries at the moment, and this is no exception from Andy Parker. This is just delightful. This isn't going to last long, so better hurry up.
Yeah, no, I as I think you alluded to at the beginning there, we both ordered almost identical orders at the same time from Andy, and I certainly enjoyed all of these beers at the weekend, and that was the one thing that really struck me was the condition, the body, the mouthfeel was absolutely up there with being a cask ale, but then it's just packed so full of flavour. They've just got bags of flavour in them.
Yeah, this is fruity, it's bitter, it's dry, and it's got it's quite a soft aroma, but it's there. It says it's an American Pale Ale. It's an American Pale Ale.
It is, and I think slightly West Coast leaning as well, isn't it? Because it's got that lovely resinous, pithy bitterness on the finish.
Yeah, very much so. At the moment, it's just, again, it's got that level at the back end of it, which just wants you to taste it again.
Yeah.
Which I think is always a sign of a good beer.
As you say, it's not going to last in the glass for very long, is it?
And how's your Cascadian Dark Ale?
It's absolutely delicious. Again, it's got that body and mouthfeel. The first thing you get on the nose is a waft of pine, which is absolutely what I look for in this style of beer. That gives way. There's some lovely citrus notes in there, and then there's the subtlest hint of roastedness going on in there. For me, it's an exemplar of this style. We'll call it Cascadian Dark Ale, call it Black IPA, but it's everything I want from it. It's if I was drinking this blindfolded, I probably would struggle to tell that it was a dark beer, and that's essentially what I'm looking for in the style.
I mean, the compliment I would pay to Andy, other than the fact that I think we've waxed lyrical about his beers in the past, and you have predating opinions. I put his Black IPA up there with the from some of the beers from Colonel, like the India Porter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Similar sort of mouthfeel, similar sort of body, and similar sort of flavour and aroma profile. And I without speaking for Andy, I'm sure most people would take that as a pretty big compliment. So yeah, I mean, I smashed one of those at the weekend as well, and it didn't last long, but it did have all those notes you say there.
I imagine if Andy's listening to this right now, he's probably just fallen off his chair with that compliment that you've just paid him in terms of it being up there with some of the Colonel's dark offerings. And I would absolutely agree. It absolutely is. And it's just an absolute delight to drink.
Yeah. And I look forward to hearing what you think about the second beer you've chosen later on in the show, Steve.
Yeah, well, I'm quite jealous actually because I know the beer that you're drinking is the American Red, and that's essentially the beer that set Andy off on his professional journey.
Yeah.
So that's quite a landmark beer for him. So I'm quite jealous that you're doing that one tonight, and that I'm essentially doing what is the I think Andy described it as the big brother of Shadow of the Beast, which is Altered
Yeah.
Beast. Um, but it's got Sabro in it, and apparently he's put a lot of Sabro in it. But I've said in the past with Sriracha that it behaves differently in dark beers, so I'm
Well,
actually looking forward to seeing whether Sabro is the same.
yeah, because Jet Black Heart Brewdog, which I haven't actually seen for a long time, that's got sriracha in it, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what you think of that one later on. But we've both got these ones in our glasses. Like I said, it won't last for long, so we probably need to rattle through the next few sections of the show.
I reckon so. Otherwise, we're gonna be very thirsty by the time we get to the end.
Yes.
So what have you been? Any standout beers that you've been drinking at home this past week?
Other than the aforementioned Elusive Brew, I did. I took a bit of a punt on a case of beers from Two Tribes. They're based in King's Cross in London. Just saw something come up about them, had a little look, and I was of a mind recently to order a few more sessionable beers, 330 millilitres. And Two Tribes sort of tick the box for that. They've got pale ale, an American pale ale, session IPA, and a lager, and they all sit between 4 and 5%. 330 cans with a discount code that I found. I think it was £36, including delivery for 24 cans.
Oh, that's not bad, is it?
So basically, I've got some decent fridge fillers, and I have to admit, I was pretty impressed with the pale ale Dream Factory, and also to add to the ever-growing list of lagers that I've discovered in 2020 or rediscovered as well. They've got one called Power Plant, which is a gluten-free and vegan-friendly one, but really nice. Got plenty of body. It still feels like a lager. It hasn't necessarily got that extra carbonation to it, but you can definitely sink a couple of them and not really have to worry about it too much, and don't have to think about it too much. That's probably the standout for me. I did sneak in on Sunday afternoon a little Buxton Omnipollo Yellow Belly Sunday as a starter for 10 on Sunday afternoon.
There's not. You're still going in with the high ABVs to start, are you?
Infrequently. I mean, I had a whole load of session beers lined up, so I had a few of us do at the weekend, a few WhatsApp chats and Zoom calls with people, and you don't really have to think about what you're drinking when you're doing that. So I'd lined up some session beers and some old favourites. I thought before I kick on with that, I'll treat myself half an hour, sipping a beer in the sun, feet up. Very nice way to do it, I have to admit. And because it's more of a very dessert beer, it didn't seem so out of place in the warm weather either.
Yeah, I can see that.
But as ever, tasted delicious. It's definitely a sipper though, because it is sweet, and as it warms up, that sweetness does build as well. So yeah, the Two Tribes, sessionable beers with a hint of dessert beer thrown in.
Excellent. I've got to say, Two Tribes are a brewery that I've never heard of until you mentioned them. So I've not come across them yet.
I think if you see them, I think their beers are very good in the small pack. I don't know if I've ever tried them outside of the small pack. They feel like a keg brewery to me, and I maybe do them a disservice, so apologies if I am. But I think some of their beers would transfer very nicely to city pubs, for example, city centre pubs, which have got some decent keg lines and decent variety. But yeah, if you get a chance, give it a go.
I'll keep my eye out.
By the time I do get around to seeing you, I will have finished all of mine, Steve. So sorry about that.
Clearly, the rate at which you're ordering beer, 3 orders a week or so, you know, they're not hanging around very long in your house, are they?
No,
that's for sure.
No, when I'm going out, I'm out. I'm out.
I've got nothing to really add to that because I've got to say, in the last week, I don't think I've drunk anything new, other than having some of Andy's beers at the weekend. Before drinking them on the show tonight. Everything else has just been stuff that I've just got in the fridge. It's just fridge fillers. There's a lot of baby-faced assassin going on here and a lot of Jaipur as well. So other than that, I've got nothing really to shout about at this point.
Well, to be fair, as fridge fillers go, Steve, they may not qualify as sessionable, to use air quotes, but they're definitely both smashable.
Let's get into some news this week then, and you've got a few things that you want to bring up to start off with.
Yeah, and the first one is obviously the sad news that Roger Ryman, head brewer, St Austell, passed away very recently. I'm sure most of our listeners and people who engage with us are aware of this. I'm not sure that you or I have ever met him, Steve.
I can't say that I have, unfortunately.
But judging by a lot of the comments I've seen and a few things I've listened to as well, he seems to be a much loved person, both in and outside of the beer world. To be fair, so first of all, obviously, condolences to his family and his friends. I know that St Austell is very much a family brewery, and Roger's wife worked at the brewery. So I'm sure there's a big hole at St Austell at the moment. He is responsible for Tribute and Proper Job, two cask beers that would definitely make my top 10. Big fan of both of those, and I was lucky enough to go to St Austell Brewery last year. Very lucky that Michael chose to do that on his birthday. I was very, very fortunate that he decided to do that for me. But listened to a very excellent podcast drop recently by Emma Inch. She dropped it, I think, the last day or so. It's a bit of a tribute to Roger. So we'll put links into the show notes for that as well. And all I want to say is, rest in peace, Roger. And I'll be raising a glass of tribute and or proper job in the very near future to you. Moving on to other news. I have a few European pub updates for you, Steve.
Okay, so this is the almost the ongoing saga of
Yes.
Bars reopening gradually across Europe and where we're at in the UK.
Yeah.
So I know we've been getting regular updates from you in terms of what's been going on in Germany.
Yeah, so with Germany, basically, as far as my brother's concerned, everything is just ticking along steadily. There hasn't been a massive rise in numbers of people going, but obviously there is a lack of tourism as well, and groups and people moving around. But interestingly, I did specifically ask him about, toilets and stuff, and he said basically the two main things they've done with toilets is hand sanitizers on the way in, way out, notices, and they didn't have much else to add to that. So that was quite interesting. That seemed a very low key approach for a country that has been so hot on the lockdown originally and so hot on the contact testing as well. So I might have to dig into that a little bit more and see if I can get a bit more detail either from my brother or from my sister-in-law who actually works in the pubs herself.
I think toilets is going to be one that we're going to come back to a few times tonight. Actually,
yeah, I suspect so, and yeah. I'm not surprised, to be honest. I'm not surprised. But coincidentally, I was actually on a call today with one of my colleagues in the Netherlands, and it was a bank holiday on Monday, June the 1st in the Netherlands. And it was also the same day that bars and restaurants were able to reopen. And so the two standout things that he said were that they're adopting the 1.5 meters. So not 1 meter, not 2 meters. They've gone for 1.5 meters social distancing rule in bars and restaurants, as well as I think some other measures such as masks and hand sanitizer. But the other thing he said, and I don't know whether this is just in the Amsterdam area, which is where he lives, is online reservations. So as he put it, if you're out for a walk on a nice day, you just fancy popping in somewhere, you can't at the moment. I think we may have spoken or touched upon that previously, but that seems to have been something that's definitely come about in the Netherlands, whether it's across the whole country, city centre based, or some other criteria that they use, I'm not sure. But I do speak to my Netherlands colleagues quite regularly. So if I get any more updates from that, I'll add it to the list of European updates for us.
It'll be interesting to see how things are progressing. Here in the UK, we've heard news this week of a popular and a rather large venue in Manchester, Albert Schloss, has revealed that that the measures that they're gonna put in place to reopen when they're allowed to. So they've installed perspex screens between booths at the bar and at the bar. They've also introduced a one-way system. They've removed a lot of tables and they've cut down its menu. Maximum capacity has been significantly reduced. Guests are greeted by a sign displaying house rules, a marked out queuing system, and a beer tap style hand sanitizing station. There's a thermal imaging camera at the entrance to the venue, and before being seated or served, customers will also face temperature screening, which alerts staff to anyone with an elevated temperature. If staff suspect anyone is unwell, they're likely to be asked to leave and seek medical attention. That seems to be quite a lot of steps that they're putting in place. And one of the other points I make here is that they've admitted that operating with such a reduced capacity won't be financially profitable, but it should at least help to pay staff wages. So it's interesting that they've put a certain number of measures in place to try and bring people back in safely.
And, you know, first of all, I think the first thing to be said is credit where credit's due, but those measures do seem very extensive and very expensive. And I'm not sure every venue could either implement those changes and or afford them either.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this before in terms of size of venues. Now, I've been in that place, and it's huge. For them to be able to introduce those things, they've got the space to do that. But like we've said time and time again, your smaller pubs are going to struggle to introduce such measures.
Yeah, and like I said, even if you could, the cost versus what you're going to make on it, because your numbers are going to be down as well.
Yeah.
Unless we're suddenly all going to turn to drinking, taking it in turns to drink 7 days a week in the pub, and we even it out. So rather than your peaks and troughs, you know, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, perhaps, or maybe even a Sunday with music, that kind of thing. And we all say, well, okay, well, I used to go on a Saturday, but I need to go on a Tuesday now.
Yeah.
So unless you can flatten out the numbers so that by the end of the week you're roughly getting the same footfall, I don't see that happening, to be honest. But it's an option, and people may do it. But that's, like I said, I think some businesses, some offices probably won't install that kind of stuff.
Now, in regards to that place in Manchester opening up, what with it being in Manchester, Steve from Beer Nouveau had a view on this as well. And in a series of tweets about this, he said, we're planning on, and this is in terms of what Steve at Beer Nouveau is going to do at his tap room to try and reopen safely. So we're planning on sanding down and freshly varnishing all of our tables so they can be easily wiped down between groups. We're sorting out a storage container so that all of our sofas and armchairs and the fabric seats can be put into storage and replaced with easy wipe seats. And I'm currently working on several ways that we can provide safe, clean toilet facilities. The closest I've seen another venue do about toilets is a one-way system in and out because they have 2 doors to them. It's utterly ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous whitewashing of safety concerns to stick in perspex screens, move half the tables, full PPE for staff, etc., etc. If you then do nothing about the toilets, it will make it all look good on the outside, maybe even get you in the local paper. But if the whole of the visit isn't covered, you may as well be coughing on people as they walk in.
It is the one big thing which we're struggling to get around and get your head around. And the amount of things, even if I look at Beer Nouveau, I mean, not everyone's been there, but at least with Beer Nouveau's toilet, it's very big, and you can quite clearly see when someone's gone to it, so to speak. So you can easily avoid the crossover to and from, but you still got to go in and use it.
And it's only a single toilet.
Yeah.
So you're then relying on whoever's used it has then got to take responsibility to then clean it. Don't mean thoroughly clean it, but obviously sanitize, you know, the seat, the area, make sure they wash their hands, you know, in and out, and that sort of thing. And I still think it's the one thing that in all of these things that we're talking about week after week here on the show, and that I'm reading, that I'm seeing on the television, I'm hearing on the radio, nobody is considering the toilets and what the toilet situation is, and also, anywhere that's reopening.
That's the same for offices, because I've been on some calls recently where that's been talked about, and I don't think anyone's come up. I think we probably have to, you know, to give it context. How do you manage the toilet situation in any environment outside of your own personal home?
Exactly, yeah.
You know, if it's a public, I mean, I know that the woods near me, they've got some public toilets, and they've all got signs up. saying closed for maintenance. That's just because those are the signs they happen to have. They're just closed because they haven't got a plan for those public toilets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be the same for offices, private shared dwellings, anything like that. I used to live in a bedsit. We had a downstairs toilet with an upstairs bathroom, and there was 6 flats. I don't live there anymore, obviously, but what would I have done there? What would I have done during this whole period of time?
Yeah, I mean, and again, you talk about public toilet facilities. I went to the beach at the weekend, socially distanced, of course, and made sure that I actually parked close to a public toilet that was open, and the council had made sure there were signs up saying, "Please ensure it's one person in the toilet at a time." Now, obviously, that meant that at times there were queues, but people were adhering to it as far as I could see. I suppose the only time that it would become an issue would be if you walked up to it and there wasn't a queue. You don't necessarily know if there's already someone in there or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
and
kind of
you
approached
get that
with
awkward crossover, won't you?
Yeah. It's kind of, nobody wants to be peering around into a toilet, almost like you're looking over someone's shoulder type of thing. But it's interesting. It's like I say, it's the one thing for me that time and time again still seems to be the thing that's being missed out is yes, we can start to open up facilities and we can introduce social distancing measures, but what about the toilets?
Yeah, and we're talking about going to places where generally over a period of time we need to visit the loo.
Absolutely. I couldn't go to the pub for even 2 hours. If I was to book a 2-hour slot in a pub, I would need to go at least once. And if I went once, I'd probably have to go again.
Toilets are almost like the unspeakable truth at the moment. We know what it is, but no one's really addressing it because I think they truly know we can't.
And that's the thing. Nobody seems to want to address it because they know that there isn't a way of addressing it that isn't going to cost.
What we'll end up with, if we're truly going to open places up, and this is the same for offices, factory sites, whatever it might be, this is going to be probably the biggest risk acceptance we have to make. So if we're going to go back to work, if we're going to go back to the pub, if we're going to go back to restaurants, if we're going to fly, get a train. If I'm on a train for an hour plus, there's a good chance I might need the loo because I will, even if I'm not having train beers, I've probably had a bottle of water, then you will need to use the loo. And therefore, what your risk acceptance is, I need to do it. Therefore, I will take as many precautions as I can. But that's still not being said. It's not been openly said, is it?
No, it's a case of controlling what you can control, isn't it? Right, yeah. And hoping that others have done the same, and therefore the pay it forward almost is that we're all controlling what we control, and therefore we're all going to be as safe as we possibly can.
And that's what it'll be. And again, that'll then come back down to that whole thing. How long does that last when people are socially lubricated?
Yeah. Let's take a slight pause in this discussion because we are going to come back to this tonight in quite some depth, purely because I've noticed that you've just finished your beer there.
I did say it wasn't going to last long.
Final thoughts on, what was it, the Overdrive, lap 22, was it?
The Overdrive, this is lap 18, so this is a new iteration of it. Columbus and Citra, 5.5%. And like I said, it just drinks like a cask beer. One of those cask beers, which if you got on this of an evening, unless there was something fantastic on, once you had a couple of pints, I think you'd just stick with it. I mean, I think you'd feel it by the end of the night at 5.5%, but you'd have a good time getting there.
2 hops that work beautifully together as well, though. Two of the big American sea hops.
Like I said, the balance between the two, as well as the earthy dryness as well, and the fruity aromas, just works so well. And if we weren't recording tonight, I just would have opened a second bottle of this.
Yeah.
And what's your thoughts on the Altered Beast?
This is the Shadow of
Shadow,
the Beast.
sorry.
Altered Beast is coming next, mate. It's just delicious all the way down again. You just keep getting those piney notes. There's a little bit of orange in there, a little bit of dark chocolate as well, which all just complement each other and work really, really well, leading to a nice lasting bitterness in there. It's just it's an absolute great example of that style of beer.
So 2 out of 2 so far then.
Yeah. So shall we get the next beers in the glass?
I think it's an excellent idea.
And then we can move on to this week's question. So going into my glass then is the Altered Beast, which is a slightly ramped up version of the Shadow of the Beast. So I didn't actually say Shadow of the Beast.
I was about to ask that. What percentage was the original then?
So Shadow of the Beast was 5%, and Altered Beast is 6.8%. So it's quite a step up. Again, in the glass, it's a lovely big frothy head straight away.
I had to admit,
on
visually, which for the benefit of everyone else is pointless. That looks really good, Steve.
Oh,
I mean, to be fair, the head on my American Red ain't looking too shabby either.
Oh, I'll tell you what, mate, straight away, the aroma on that kind of pineapple and passion fruit tropical nose from the Sabro is absolutely dominant.
Should we get in straight away then? Come on.
Yeah, come on. Cheers. It's like it's still got that tropical squash feel to it. It's very, very soft. Lots of pineapple, some passion fruit, some orange in there as well. It really is dominant again, though. It seems to be wherever that hop is used, it does absolutely take over from any other hops that are in the brew. And I believe I may be wrong here, but I believe this is Sabro and Citra that have gone into this. But I'll check that while you tell me about your American Red.
So I'm on the Level Up American Red. This is level 22, Cascade and Amarillo. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, this really is the beer which kick-started Andy moving from being an excellent home brewer to being an excellent commercial brewer. Having won the national homebrewing competition back in 2014, 6 years ago.
Wow!
I know, barely can believe it. So much has happened.
I was at that event that evening when Andy won that as well, and it was kind of a great moment to be there because I had met Andy about a year, 2 years before. It was lovely to see all the work that he's put into brewing actually pay off. And I know it took him a while to actually then start the brewery, but I think he had to make sure he had all of the pieces in the right places.
And obviously judging by the beers, he did it the right way. But just to give the bit of blurb, in many ways, this is the beer that started things for us. The first iteration was named winning beer in the Craft Beer Company National Homebrewing Awards in 2014. We used the prize money as a deposit on a 5 barrel liter brew house, and the rest, as they say, is history. So the money from the prizes went straight to this was the genesis of it, wasn't it?
That's the beer that launched the brewery, yeah. Basically.
The beer itself, I've had Level Up American Red before. I would say that red beers aren't always my favourite because sometimes with the red beers, either if you've got too much rye in them, it can be a bit too spicy, a bit too peppery. Sometimes they can be a bit too toffee caramel. Again, this one has got a nice balance between the sweetness and the hops. Definitely not as bitter as the Overdrive. Sweet, subtle, well balanced. This is a beer I would probably have a couple of, and then I would go back to the Overdrive.
I love an American Red, and when they're done well, they are so tasty. And I could drink them all day long. I really could, and especially when you find a good one on cask as well. It's a thing of absolute beauty.
And again, this would stand up on cask. Comes in at 5%. I mean, I don't see Andy's beer enough on cask, to be honest, because where we live, even in London, I don't see it very often. But this just puts me in that mind of, being in a pub, in a bar, in a beer garden, sinking some cask pints. Again, the conditioning on this is excellent.
Yeah, same again with the Altered Beast. Just going back to the recipe for the Altered Beast. So the Shadow of the Beast was hopped with Cascade, Mosaic, and Citra. Same three hops used in Alter Beast, although they ramped all of them up a little bit, and they added Sabro as well to that mix. I'm guessing, from what I'm tasting, to bring a lot of tropical notes, a lot of soft stone fruit notes in to balance out those big, bold American top flavours.
But ultimately, is it working for you?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna be honest. I think that the Sabro hop is still dominating, and I think it's still giving too many of the soft tropical characteristics that I don't necessarily look for in a beer.
Okay, well let's see how it goes as it starts to warm up a little bit in the glass, perhaps as well.
Yeah. Well, while we're drinking these, let's get into this week's question.
Opinions, 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 opinions.
Which was, do you think social distancing can be truly achieved in pubs? We had 793 votes for this. 16.1% of people said yes, and a whopping 83.9% of people saying no.
Wow, that's pretty conclusive.
Yeah, I'm not surprised actually, and as we go through some of these comments, you'll see the reason why. I think because I think a lot of the feedback that we've had is a lot of probably how most people are feeling right now. From Bacallion at Bacallion UK, it's difficult enough in supermarkets or walking about. Throw booze into the mix with limited space, and it will make it hard work. Josh Howes at Joshua A. Howes. Good question. I voted no, but it's also an opportunity to say that the suggestions that have been put forward really make me not want to go to the pub. I'm not saying they're bad suggestions, but the thought of being in a sanitised pub is almost worse than just being at home. From Beer O'Clock Brewing at BO Brewing. In some larger pubs, perhaps, but once people have had a few drinks, they will forget themselves. There's always going to be crowding in the toilets. I certainly won't be rushing back to pubs. It will be too stressful worrying about social distancing and defeats the object of going. From Johnny Beerboy at Johnny Beerboy. True social distancing? No, I don't think so. No way in a smallish building serving alcohol with communal toilet areas that people aren't going to inadvertently pass each other at less than 2 metres. I think a loose version of distancing could be achieved maybe 75% of the time. And then finally, from Simon Dewhurst at Simo Sloth, I'm undecided on this one. Part of me thinks that if they can be opened, for example, spoons, then they should be. But another part of me feels that this would be unfair on the smaller village pubs who cannot because of design and size. It's a tough one.
At the Owl Lady, no, and it upsets me to say so. I can't see how the convivial atmosphere, snuggly corner, or silly, drunken yet important conversations that I associate with the pub could happen whilst keeping 2 metres away from everyone. Maybe we all need to shift our ideals to keep the pubs alive. And from Rich at Bicardo, social distancing defeats the whole point of the pub, which is coming together to socialise. And to be fair to Rich, he sort of summed up the comments from Guy Miller at Brew Guy, Ham Hatef at Gregor_J_ and Andy Kenny at Andy Kenny 27. And I think there's quite a few other comments along the same sort of vein as well.
Yeah, let's just pause there for a moment and pick up on some of those comments that were made. First of all, I think that point from the Owl Lady was absolutely perfect. It's, you know, those kind of discussions that you often find yourself in, random ones sometimes that will take you off down a path. I know you and I in particular, you know, we were in a Dublin pub at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's where the genesis of Opinions on Films came from, because we suddenly decided that it was a great idea. But it's going to be very difficult, isn't it, to kind of recreate what we see or what we used to see as the pub in the future.
Definitely, and if I just think back to our day out in the first Saturday of January for Uncrulier's birthday. A group of us in the Vic, we went from pub to pub. We did a fair section of pubs in Colchester, and we didn't have to worry. We didn't have to think about stuff. So if we needed to get close to someone to have that little bit of a conversation while something else was going on and conversations crisscrossing each other, there's a lack of formality, isn't there? There's, you know, someone, you say hello, you put your arm around them. Yeah, those things, all those things which perhaps come naturally to us.
Should should we actually stop saying when are things going to return to normal, because actually they're not, and what things are going to return to is in fact a new normal. It's going to be a new way of doing things. Certainly in the short term, it's going to be a new and a different way of doing things. And do we just need to accept that actually things are going to be different now?
I would say so. And I know that some people don't like the phrase new normal, but our expectations of just suddenly going back to where we were, it is going to be different. All walks of our life will be different, and quite frankly, they should be different at the moment, because there is still a killer virus out there. But the points that have been made in those first two sections that we read out were very much along the lines of very two distinct themes. Probably can't achieve the social distancing, and if you can, do I really want to be there anyway?
Yeah, because it's a lot of people saying actually, well, that's not the pub for me, and I'd rather not go, which is a shame, because we know that these businesses that we know and love are going to need our support coming out of the other side of this.
And that's maybe where, say, Danny, the old lady, her comment, maybe we all need to shift our ideals to keep the pubs alive. Maybe those pubs who can get us close to achieving that goal of social distancing and everyone feeling safe and secure in their environment, maybe in the short to medium term, we have to accept the pub won't be the pub as we know it, but if we want any sort of pub, we still need to support it. Some cracking comments in those first couple of sections.
Yeah.
Some really cracking comments.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking about the pub, and insofar as it being a business and also the staff they employ, so some of the comments that we had here are, first of all, from the Hotspot podcast at Hotspot UK. I don't understand how the bar staff will manage to keep 2 meters apart, let alone the customers. I just don't see how it can work without limiting numbers of customers. What about all of the micro pubs, which aren't generally the most spacious anyway? Sad, but I don't think it can happen. From Chris Clough at 9 Squirrels Brew. Much as I can't wait for pubs to open, it's got to be a no. There's no feasible way to guarantee safety of bar staff, and besides, social distancing cancels out most of the things we're all missing about going to the pub. From James at James Moosh, I don't think so. How can a pub be profitable with a small fraction of its usual capacity? Without being busy on Friday and Saturday nights, how do they take in enough to pay their staff and bills? I haven't seen anyone answer this.
Returning to a subject we've covered quite a few times so far in this show. Toilets, from Timmy Tentoes, cracking name Timmy Tentoes. No chance. Look at the space inside the boys' toilets. Adequate sinks, drying facilities, etc. You know, again, some really good points. I think people have really been thinking about this before the question went out. These people have been thinking about, how do I go back to the pub? How do the pubs reopen?
These are the discussions that people have been having at home with their friends, and you know, probably on Zoom calls and you know, WhatsApp groups and all the rest of it. These are the discussions that people are having right now.
Yeah, and the pub, you know, let's be honest, not just in our circle, British life. Pub comes into it. Even people who are infrequent visitors to pubs are probably crying out for the pub now. From Richard Hawkins at Hotwell Dicky, I'm saying yes, but only large pubs and beer gardens, which is a shame, as ironically they tend to have less beer choice, and I prefer smaller places as they have more atmosphere. Also, perhaps I'm saying yes because I'm missing the pub. ... Those ... dots almost looked a little bit sad.
They did. They needed a sad emoji at the end of that.
Yeah. From Darren Ramage at Darren_Ramage. Social distancing will only work in pubs the size of aircraft hangars or those with massive beer gardens. I can't see how it can be financially viable for a landlady, and as a customer, it'd be such a depressing experience. Same comments coming out frequently here. And finally, from Tom Tapped at Tom_Tapped. The pubs that could implement social distancing correctly tomorrow are probably the soulless, gentrified vacuums I tend to avoid. I just fear for the pubs I love, who might struggle to adapt to this new reality. And that's quite a good way of putting it, new reality.
Yeah, those are conversations, again, we've had in terms of the places that we like to frequent and how they might actually introduce some of these measures. Just to finish up here, we had a couple of points that were essentially from the landlord's point of view. So from That Beer Place at That Beer Place HQ, as unpalatable as it is, absolutely no. I've measured up, and due to our size and layout, our drinking capacity would be reduced by 93%. We all need to stay safe, and sadly, this will destroy many businesses in the hospitality trade. And then also from Richard Taylor at Rich Taylor 1608, too many factors to consider for there to be a 100% correct answer. Each pub will have to do all it can to keep staff, customers and suppliers safe. But the one thing I do know is pubs need customers to survive, so they need to feel safe if they decide to go back to the pub. Now, the first point that I want to pull out of those two is drinking capacity would be reduced by 93%.
I mean, that sounds like you've got.
Wow.
I don't know what size of place that is, but if that's a place which can hold 100 people, that means you can only hold 7.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that really brings the whole thing to life, does it not?
Yeah, and you reduce that again, so you bring it down to 10 people, becomes what, 0.7?
Yeah.
So if it's a micropub which could only hold, say, 10 to 15 people, you're just over one person.
You can have one, maybe 2 people in there sitting on opposite sides of the room.
Yeah, no point in opening that venue.
No. I think this is one that may still continue. Like I said, we've only pulled out a short number of the comments that we had. There were loads of comments on this poll this week, and there is a link in the show notes to the question. So click through to that, have a read through some of the comments. If you still want to get involved in this particular discussion, use the hashtag Hopinions, and you may very well find yourself in the next part of the show.
Let us know, write it down. Let us know, write it down. Let us know your thoughts and bitter and lingerness. Write it down.
First up from Will Watkins at Dry Your Beers. It got me through another longish run in the sun. Martin, I think I've shared a recent epiphany. A few weeks ago, I decided to stop saving my special pricier impies for the end of the night. I've definitely been appreciating them a lot more as a slow first drink. I'm not a lager drinker, but a £1 donation with each of those cans is a huge chunk of margin and incredibly generous. I'd have been taken aback by half that amount. So I think that was in reference, second part of that was in reference to the Utopian Rainbow.
Yeah, definitely. And he's right. £1 is incredibly generous per unit, isn't it?
Yeah. But good to see you're inspiring people, mate, to start their evenings on a massive Imperial Stout rather than finishing that way.
Or afternoons, depending when your afternoon versus evening starts in this sunny weather, I suppose.
Yeah. From Johnny Beerboy at Johnny Beerboy. Another lovely snippet, lads. Enjoyed the delight at the Govinda opening. Devastated that the wife has the monopoly on the tech the evening of the summer sesh, but I'm sure my boy Rob Edwards will rep the Midland Beerheads better than I could anyway.
From Sean O'Reilly at Uncrulia. Another great show, guys. Summer sesh ticket booked. Loved the poetry corner from Miles Lambert. I had resolved not to order more beer this month, but I'm tempted by your Cheshire Brewhouse recommendation. The outro music wasn't something I would expect in Steve's record collection. Well, just always expect the unexpected from Steve's outro tunes.
Yeah, I think I went back to Sean and said that I was actually quite a big Cooler Shaker fan back in the day. So that was the obvious choice for me in terms of the last show.
From Beer Isolation Revere, a.k.a. Jules Gray at beer_Revere. Finally listened to the Corkage show. Think it'd be useful if you had people on in the trade who could explain how those businesses work. For example, venues will work on different GP percentages to operate their businesses depending on overall running costs. I'm off trade with a bit of on and a bottle shop. So lots going on I could share. There's more work involved in sales, pouring, offering glasses, glass washing, offering cleaning, services, toilet, seating, toilets again. Everyone's talking about toilets. Lighting, music, clearing away bottles, paying for recycling. Now, off the back of that comment from Jules, I think at some point in the future of these snippets, we are going to have Jules on as a guest with us, maybe when things start to open up.
I think that's the current plan, yeah.
Yeah, give us a bit of an overview, both of what we're talking about in terms of Corkage, but also give us a bit of an insider view about how things are going once we open up as well. So I think we'll get two sides of a coin there as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting to Jules about that in the future. From your boy Rob Edwards at Rob_Edwards90. Great show, guys. I'll get thinking about my tunes for the summer sesh. And then from I Love Sabro Hops, which is appropriate. at Discombobulated. I totally agree about the Cheshire Brewhouse moving to cans. Plus, the design of the cans is possibly one of the best examples of appealing to all demographics. Tasteful and appealing in any beer drinker's fridge and stand out for all the right reasons. But in response to the Liverpool comment, I can't help but wonder whether the association with the big beer sponsorship, Carlsberg, Chang, etc., is why Liverpool is seen to many to be a lager city, and the reason it has comparably fewer craft breweries venues than similar-sized cities.
From the Cheshire Brewhouse, we remember the first time Stephen Martin tried our beers and said, great beers, but the designs are a bit off point. I think working with art by volume and working out a concept has fixed our packaging woes. We didn't change what we do with the beer much. And I'm pretty pleased about that last sentence.
So am I, and I'm also very humbled that they listened to the podcast and took on board the comments that we made about the designs.
Yeah, I mean, I was blown away when I saw the first couple of sentences of that, but I was ultimately very pleased that they didn't change the beer much, because those were the beers I fell in love with from Cheshire Brewhouse. From Adam Johnson at Maybe Not a Fad. As per Martin's suggestion with Brooklyn Brewery potentially going into some of the poorer Marston's pubs, I also wonder if some London Fields may make their way in there as well. Interesting point. I don't think we even considered that, did we?
No, but it's very likely, isn't it? Considering Carlsberg's investment into London Fields.
Well, why not? If you've got access to taps and you've got beer being produced.
From Beers Without Frontiers podcast at beers_frontiers. As ever, great show, guys. Great input from Ruth, especially on the Milesberg story. Really getting into the detail of what the deal means for drinkers and employees alike. From Stay at Home Maguire at Mike Maguire. Another great snippet, lads. The input from the guest drinker was very good. Agree the comments about increasing FOMO due to social media, but the bank balance is always a blocker. I think not getting to our locals to try new beers also sees us chasing our favourite styles.
From Irish Beer Snob at Irish Beer Snob. Another really enjoyable snippet, folks. I'm going to have to add Cheshire Brewhouse now to my FOMO list. Agree 100% with the points made on outside seating as pub solution. We don't have that culture in the UK and Ireland. Government tried to bring in legislation here about 15 years ago to simplify legislation to allow for a cafe culture like Europe, which would have meant pub licenses being worthless overnight. They currently sell for about €100,000 here. Needless to say, the pub lobby got that kiboshed. And thirdly, there is talking of going to 1 metres here, given numbers have stabilised and now regularly under 100 new cases per day. If it's that, a lot more pubs will be able to open. Also loved Steve at Beer Nouveau thoughts on heritage. Thank you for that, Wayne. Interesting to see if Ireland do go to the 1 metre. And I do wonder whether they've had any consultation with their correspondent in Huddersfield about that.
Who knows? Because he seems to be consulting with many different countries at the moment, doesn't he? Following that blog post that he put out and subsequent discussions about it.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. So from said correspondent, Mark Johnson at Mark N. Johnson, just finished the last 5 minutes. I'd forgotten to, was busy consulting with the German authorities on bar safety. Great chat and industry insight. I may be prompted to write that post about cans making breweries cool I have in my head. Looking forward to #Summer Sesh.
Well, it'll be good to see you, Mark. And as ever, we look forward to any blog posts coming out from you.
Oh, always. It's always nice that we kind of have this synchronous harmony with Mark in terms of what he's writing and what we're talking about at the same time. Just to pick up on what Mark was saying there about the Summer Sesh, that is this coming Saturday, as this podcast releases on the Thursday. There are only a couple of spaces left on session 1. If you want to get involved at this point, best thing to do is probably to send us a DM to see if there are any places, and where possible we'll try and get you involved in the festivities on Saturday evening. Let's get some final thoughts on the second of the 2 Elusive brews that we've been drinking. As you finished the American Red, how was it?
I haven't too much to add. I mean, it's definitely got a lovely hop profile, as well as having that malty backbone, which adds a bit of that sweetness and a little bit of that toffee caramel without being too overblown. If I have to have a favourite red style, it would be the American Red, but I think it's a bit like American Browns, because they add a bit of that hop character to it, and those hops that I really like, West Coast hops. that I can get behind it, I would still plump for the Overdrive over the American Red if I was sitting in a pub sessioning it.
I having again tried both of those, I would actually be the other way round. I would definitely be sessioning that American Red all day long.
How has your Sabro hopped infused Alter Beast gone?
It wasn't for me. That hop, I do not like Sabro hops. I chose to do this one tonight because I wanted to be challenged to see if the Sabro hop did anything in a dark beer, and it doesn't do anything different for me. It's just too tropical. It's too soft, stone fruity.
Has it got any of that? What about the coconut sort of element?
Not so much. Not so much. It's what is very, very prominent from it are those big tropical notes. So there's lots of pineapple in there, lots of passion fruit as well. Those are the two that are really dominant for me.
More the New England IPA style of aroma and flavours?
Yeah, it's a shame because I would have loved to have just tried maybe just a double version of Shadow of the Beast without Sabro hops in it, because that would have been absolutely cracking.
Surely Andy has a recipe for an amped up version that uses the same hops, but just increases the hops and the malt profile.
I think he does, but I think this particular one was a collab with Beer No Evil as well. So this is a slightly different label to all these other ones. This is the label actually says the beta series. And it simply just says what the beer is, the ABV, and whether it was a collab. So I'm guessing there were other influences in there, but it's not for me. It's not a hop that I enjoy. That's 3 times now I've had it in almost as many weeks, and I'm just really not getting on with it. So I probably will look to avoid that one in the future. What have we got coming up next week? Do we know what we're doing next week yet? We've got a guest drinker.
We have a guest drinker. One of our listeners is joining us, and I think we're digging into our Belgian beer stock, Steve.
That's the current plan, yeah. So things could be interesting as we're recording on Sunday after the summer sesh. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether I'm ready for some Belgian beers or not. But
always ready for Belgian beers, Steve. What's the matter with you, man?
Yep, no, that's true. We are looking forward to being joined by another one of our listeners in the guest drinker slot. We are still taking people for that if you do want to get involved. There is quite a waiting list at the moment, though, because we are doing it every other week. But if you do want to get involved as a guest drinker, make sure you DM us and we'll add you to the list. So I think the only thing left to say there is probably this week is cheers. And we look forward to chatting to you all again next week.
Cheers.